워싱턴주 시애틀의 자랑이자 압도적인 표 차이로 8선에 당선되신 샌디 류 위원님을 모시고 또 민주평통 21기 심재환 상임위원님, 송영욱 포틀랜드 지회장님, 민주평통 전직 협의회장님, 그리고 시애틀 지역의 지도자님들과 멀리 포틀랜드에서 참석하여 주신 자문위원님께 감사를 드립니다. 우리 자유민주평통의 의장이신 윤석열 대통령께서는 자유, 평화, 번영의 통일한국, 대한민국이라는 슬로건으로 8.15 통일 독트린에 대한 말씀과 함께 자유 통일 비전 확산과 북한 인권 개선에 앞장서 줄 것을 당부하셨습니다. 오늘 탈북자 지원과 북한의 인권 상황을 개선하기 위한 활동을 지속적으로 펼치며 서울평화상을 수상하신 북한 인권 개선의 어머니 같은 수잔 솔티 박사님을 모시고 뜻깊은 강연회를 개최하게 된 것은 매우 감사한 일입니다. 이 자리에 계신 모든 분들이 함께 한반도 평화 통일에 튼튼한 버팀목이 되어주시기를 부탁드리며 다시 한번 감사드립니다. Ladies and gentlemen, I am truly honored to introduce the chairperson for the North Korea Freedom Human Rights Group, Dr. Suzanne Scholte. She will be addressing of the most important subject regarding the North Korea human rights movement and their freedom, referencing the August 15th doctrine created by President Yoon Suk-yeol. I thank all of you for your attendance and support during tonight's presentation. Thank you. Enjoy tonight's lecture.
반갑습니다. 서원지 총영사입니다. 민주평통 시애틀 협의회 주최 북한 인권 및 자유에 관한 세미나에 참석하게 되어서 매우 기쁩니다. 오늘 이 행사를 주최해 주신 우리 김수영 시애틀 평통 협의회 또 회장님께 감사드리고 또 이 행사를 지원해 주신 모든 평통위원분들 또 참석해 주신 모든 분들 다 감사드립니다. 무엇보다 오늘 강연을 위해서 시애틀 방문해 주신 우리 수잔 솔티 박사님께 진심으로 감사드립니다. 아마 아까도 우리 회장님께서 말씀하셨지만 수잔 솔티 박사님의 별명이 북한 인권의 어머니이십니다. 그야말로 지난 30년간 국제사회에서 북한 인권 문제를 지속적으로 제기해왔고 2004년도에 미국 내에서 북한인권법을 탄생하는 데도 주도적 역할을 하셨습니다. 그리고 이제 지금 실질적으로 탈북자민들을 많이도 돕고 계시고요. 아마도 이런 또 공로가 인정돼서 또 이제 서울평화상도 수상하셨던 것 같습니다. 정말 굉장히 또 이렇게 북한 인권 문제에 저명하신 분을 모시게 된 것 같습니다. 아마 잘 아시겠지만 우리 윤석열 정부는 2022년도에 담대한 구상을 발표를 해서 북한 문제에 대한 전격적인 제안을 했습니다. 그리고 얼마 전에 30년 만에 처음으로 우리 통일 독트린을 발표를 했습니다. 자유, 평화, 민주라는 세 가지 원칙 하에서 남북 당국자 간 회담도 제안을 했고 그리고 국제사회에서 통일의 지지를 얻기 위한 국제평화 한반도 포럼도 제안을 했습니다. 하지만 잘 아시겠지만 북한은 지금 두 국가 정권, 그죠? 두 개의 정권으로 맞대응을 하고 있고 최근에 또 우크라이나 전에 파병을 해왔고 그리고 또 미국 대선 직전에 ICBM 장거리 탄도미사일을 발사를 해서 국제 유엔의 안보리 결의를 정면으로 위반하고 한반도 평화의 안정에 저해한 행위를 계속하고 있습니다. 아마 이제 미국 대선이 모두 끝났습니다. 많이들 지금 언론에서 이 트럼프 당선자께서 대선 기간 동안 여러 가지 언급하신 것 때문에 한미 관계는 이제 위기가 오지 않을까라는 많은 예측들을 하고 있습니다. 그럼에도 불구하고 또 이런 새로운 외교 환경의 변화가 우리에게 또 기회를 가져다 줄 것이다 라고 하는 많은 예측들도 하고 있습니다. 한 가지 이 자리에서 여러분께 분명히 말씀드릴 수 있는 것은 어떠한 정권 변화가 오더라도 한미동맹의 굳건한 관계에는 변함이 없을 것이다 라는 말씀을 다시 한번 드리겠습니다. 오늘 수잔 솔티 박사님의 이런 강연이 우리 북한의 인권 문제에 대한 어떤 시각을 넓히고 그런 접근법에 대해서 다양하게 고찰해보는 그런 시간과 동시에 한미 관계의 새로운 방향에 대해서도 여러분이 고찰해볼 수 있는 그런 시간이 되었으면 좋겠습니다. Dr. Suzanne Scholte, thank you very much for joining us tonight and delivering such a timely and important lecture on those human rights and freedom. I understand that you are the open called Mother of Human Rights, North Korean Human Rights. So a title that reflects your unwavering, the devotion and dedication for advancing North Korean human rights issues over the past 30 years. So I would like to express my deep admiration for your sustained activism. So I also look forward to your continued support and efforts for the improving human rights in Korea. Lastly, I also hope that today's forum will give us unique opportunity to gain an insight into the actionable steps and the potential solution to address the humanitarian crisis of North Korea. Thank you so much. 감사합니다.
감사합니다. 저희도 포틀랜드 지회장님 오셨습니다. 다음은 오순걸 시애틀협의회 고문 단장을 소개해드립니다. 제10기 민학균 시애틀협의회 회장님을 소개해드립니다. 박영민 11기, 12기 금방 계시면 소개해드립니다. 제13기 신광재 회장님을 소개해드립니다. 이수잔 16기, 17기 회장이었습니다. 김성훈 18기, 19기 회장님을 소개해드립니다.
짧게만 말씀드리면 일단 동부에 오셨어요. 그리고 이분은 현재 아까 영사님께서도 말씀하신 것처럼 북한 한국인의 자유, 인권, 존엄성 증진을 위해서 지금 약 20여 년 이상 활동한 북한 인권 운동의 세계적인 활동가 중에 한 분이시고요. 아까 제가 점심 먹으면서 여쭤봤는데 1년에 최소 4번 한국을 방문해서 한국의 모든 국회의원과 이제 정상급들 분들과 함께 만나서 북한과 한국, 남한이 어떻게 앞으로 통일을 관련해서 어떤 일을 해야 할지도 의논을 많이 한다고 하셨습니다. 그리고 이분은 지금 미국의 비정부 기관인 디펜스 포럼이라는 그 기관이 있는데 이곳의 의장이고, 디펜스 포럼은 그 국방과 자유, 민주주의, 인권 증진을 위한 비영리 단체예요. 그래서 통일 관련해서 조금 더 관심 있으신 분들은 도네이션 해주시면 앞으로 더 좋은 방향으로 그 돈이 쓰여질 것 같습니다. 그리고 이분은 2008년 제9회 서울평화상을 수상하셨고요. 지금 현재 저희가 역대 대통령들이 있는데 그 대통령들과 항상 늘 만나 뵙고 통일에 관련돼서 이야기를 하셨다고 하고요. 오늘 이 자리에 오시기까지 저랑 굉장히 많은 이메일을 주고받았고 오늘 강연은 영어로 진행되지만 아마 슬라이드상 사진이 많아서 이해는 굉장히 쉬우실 것 같습니다. 여기까지 소개해드리고 얼른 빨리 만나 뵙도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
For inviting me for this wonderful opportunity and Liu Xin for helping arrange this visit. I will focus specifically on what the most recent escapees are telling us about the current situation and what about Operation Truth. To start, I believe that God is revealing much to us on the Korean Peninsula. You can see before your eyes in North Korea what a nation becomes that rejects God, a place of death and destruction, a hell on earth, where millions have died in political prison camps and from starvation. But God is literally showing us from the heavens in this first slide, slide number 1. If Eugene, go back to the slide number 1. Yeah, there we go. Those areas of light in this slide are South Korea at the right bottom of this photo, and China at the top and left-hand portion of this photo. But what's in the middle of the screen, and this is literally God showing us from heaven what happens. You would think this was a body of water, but that is a land of great darkness. and suffering both literally and figuratively. And that one bright light that you see in the middle of the photo is Pyongyang. The truth is like the Berlin airlift, except it's by land, by sea, and by air. You may remember that the Berlin airlift was carried out specifically to get help to people being starved to death by a communist dictator. That's exactly what Operation Truth is trying to do, to get help to people who are being starved to death by a communist dictator. What the defectors are doing by sending in leaflets was something that was started by the US Air Force in the 1960s, Operation Geely. This next slide, slide 6, Operation Geely, that's the classified cover photo of Operation Geely. It was sending in leaflets of factual information to the people of North Korea, delivered by airplane. Balloon launches have been used to communicate information to North Korea. Hundreds of thousands of leaflets were sent in letting North Koreans know of the torture and death of Otto Warmbier. This next slide. As well as the news that South Korea had elected a new president, Yoon Suk-yeol. So on this next slide, this is how North Koreans learned about these things that had happened. The newest technique is the water balloon. This water balloon is filled with rice, ramen noodles, Bibles, flash drives, and placed in the water to float to North Korea. Each water balloon has a picture of Kim Jong-un's face so the North Korean border guards cannot fire on them. And I brought an actual water balloon because you have to see to believe. But this is a water balloon. And it says, "This is the head of Kim Jong-un, so shoot it if you can. The North Koreans will live in a strong and unified country if Kim can be removed." Border guards cannot fire on this because they can't deface Kim Jong-un. So these are why the North Korean defectors are using the water balloon to send in these deliveries. Now this slide number 9, I love, love, love this picture. Because what do you see here in this picture? A young child, exactly. A young child with her family. Because this is about saving North Korean families. A North Korean family is in the dead of night participating in a water balloon launched to save other families. Slide number 10. These are water balloons that are being delivered. Basically, they're on their way to North Korea using the currents. And the next slide, slide 11, this is a rice bottle. I also brought a rice bottle. This is a rice bottle. Each rice bottle contains enough rice to feed a family for a week, plus US $1 bills. A $1 US can feed a family in North Korea for a week. They don't have Bidenomics there. So a US dollar bill will feed a North Korean for a week. It also in here are flash drives full of information and content. Now the content that's in there can range from messages from members of Congress to K-pop music, speeches by President Yoon, gospels and music, and all, current news and information are in the flash drives, which are also in here. There's one of the examples of one of the flash drives. So these are the rice bottles that are being used. And each rice bottle has something else very unique that is the thing that Kim Jong-un fears more than anything. I don't know if you know what that is. Not beyond K-pop. Next guess. The thing he fears more than anything is the Bible. And the North Korean defectors love sending the Bible in. They don't send one of these without putting a Bible in, because the Bible is truth. And North Koreans are learning from the Bible that they're loved and they have value as human beings.
and that God's the one that gave them freedom and loved them enough to save them by sending his son for their salvation. This next video, or the next slide is actually a video. This is an actual rice bottle launch. And if you click on it, it should go. So these are thrown. So that's an actual rice bottle launch. And then water balloons, I showed you the water balloon. They're also sending in radios, and we've been sending in several kinds. One of the radios is this rechargeable one that if they get hold of, they can actually recharge this. It's got battery, solar, and this is one of the ones we're sending in. But the one that went in most recently that we sent in was a smaller one that can easily be hidden, that has earbuds, so they can secretly listen to shortwave radio. These are both very popular. This one we especially sent in to women in China who'd been victims of trafficking that were forced to marry Chinese men so they would have some hope, some access to outside information. And then cell phones. Another thing they've been sending in is cell phones, which are especially important to the underground church. Now, for the balloon launches, this next slide is slide 13. This is an example of the leaflets that have been sending in and the balloon launches. And these leaflets, in this case, talk about pointing out information about all of the resources that are being spent to develop nuclear weapons, and they're starving to death. So pointing out how the regime is misusing misusing resources in North Korea to pay for these developing nuclear weapons while they're suffering. And these are all written by North Koreans themselves. They know how to communicate what messages need to be shared with the people of North Korea. And every leaflet tells the truth about the Kim regime and calls for the North Korean people to end it themselves, to rise up against the Kim regime. Now, the most recent balloon launch I was able to carry out with Kim Sung-min of Free North Korea Radio. It included the rice bottles and the item that Kim Jong-un fears most, the Bible, slide 14. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about this particular rice bottle launch. I circled to people's faces. Okay, Ba Kwan-min, I quoted him earlier. If you look at the gentleman with the black shirt on to the right, Ba Kwan-min, I want to tell you a little bit about Ba Kwan-min. Ba Kwan-min lived a miserable life in North Korea because his family was on the lowest end of the Sungbang system, which I know you all are familiar with, this classification system of the regime. But during the Kim Jong-il reign of terror, it was discovered that his mother had a family member who had fled to South Korea. So his entire family was banned to a rural area, and they were forced to live in terrible poverty. So he married, but when his wife was pregnant and she went into premature labor, he ran all over his rural town crying out in desperation, trying to get a doctor, a nurse, anyone to help him. But they were not worthy of any help. And his daughter was delivered in a cold, dark room of a hospital with no blankets, no towels, no doctors, no nurses, not even electricity. Freezing in that cold room, Ba Kwan-min cried out in sheer desperation. He said, "I've heard about this God in heaven. God in heaven, if you're real, please save us." Ba's wife and daughter now live, they survived, and they now live in South Korea. And he works for Free North Korea Radio, and Ba Kwan-min is in charge of our rice bottle launches. Now, please look closely at the photo of the woman in the white shirt and the khaki pants to the left of the rice bottles. That is Ji Hana. She escaped from North Korea, and she said, "For my sons and myself, I yearned for freedom more than food. Mrs. G had gone to China to try to make money to support her sons after her husband died. But she was arrested and suffered torture in a Chinese detention center because it was discovered she was attending a Bible study while a refugee in China. She was repatriated to North Korea, detained, released, escaped again to China, repatriated again, but this time she ended up in a North Korean political prison camp where she experienced and witnessed horrific human rights violations. She defected yet again, and eventually on her third try, she got to South Korea. Now get this. Despite her friends telling her not to do this, she then risked her own life to go back to China in 2019 to personally rescue her 2 sons. Can you imagine that kind of bravery? These next photos are from this year, slide 15. That's Ba Kwan-min and his family today. That's the daughter that's grown up now, and he has another child. This next slide, slide 16, is Jihana with her sons and their wives and her new grandchild. This is a work about saving families. Another photo of a rice bottle lunch, this next one I want to show you. After these are thrown into the West Sea, they will literally, you can watch it with your own eyes. When you throw them in the West Sea, they will literally form a line as they catch the current, and the current will take them so that they wash ashore directly in North Korea. This next slide, this is a picture of Kim Sung-min, who recently received the highest civilian award from President Yoon. He has been our main partner in this work as the director of Free North Korea Radio and is the one helping us to carry out Operation Truth. I believe that President Yoon understands more than any leader in the world today what is at stake. He understands that we are in a world war between democracy and communism, between freedom and slavery, between truth and lies, between God and evil. During President Yoon's powerful address to the United States Congress when he visited the United States in May 2023, he started with a quote from Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, and he used the word freedom 36 times. I believe he was acknowledging that the U.S. overcame a tragic war and division, but succeeded in ending the scourge of slavery. But South Korea is also a divided nation, half free and half slave. Everyone born of the DMZ is a slave to the Kim regime. Even the elites in power in North Korea are slaves because they wake up in the morning with only 2 choices: to be a slave of Kim Jong-un or to see their families executed before they're killed. So I heartily endorse President Yoon's goal of the peaceful unification of Korea under the Republic of Korea's constitution that acknowledges that every person born, whether born north or south of the DMZ, is entitled to the rights enshrined in the Republic of Korea's constitution. I have this deadline in my mind every day, May 2027. That is all the time we have left to accomplish that goal of peaceful unification, because there's no way to know what path South Korea will choose in the next election. Slide 19. I want to tell you about this woman. This is a picture of Kim Ji-young with her family. Ji-young is the one on the right side of the photo with her mother and sisters. Kim Ji-young is on the right. She and her family were once elites living in Pyongyang. But today, she's the director of Free North Korea Radio, a radio station she listened to when she was living in Pyongyang. She listened to Free North Korea Radio. Recently, she was in contact with her relatives, this is just 2 weeks ago, that are still living in North Korea. They warned her that the DPRK, State Security Bureau, was closely monitoring her activities. They knew she had traveled to the United States of America for North Korea Freedom Week in July, they knew she was working for Free North Korea Radio. They knew all this because they were monitoring everything she was doing. Kim Ji-young had used an alias and tried to hide her identity, but they knew it was her. Her response was, "I guess I should have been a little scared when I got that call. But I thought to myself, I have to work harder. Since they are watching our activities, I will work harder and more courageously from now on until the day when freedom comes to North Korea, until God establishes his kingdom. I ask you that you all be with us." Friends, North Korea, the regime, is closely watching our activities and what we are doing at this very historic time. We must continue to speak out boldly on behalf of the people of North Korea and reach them by land, by sea, and by air with the truth. North Koreans at every level of society must understand that all we want for them is to have the same freedoms and human rights that the people living south of the DMZ and in America and other free nations enjoy. This final slide is our Operation Truth order form. It's slide number 20. This was designed by my South Korean intern, Grayson Jang. I told him, make it look like an Uber Eats menu, and he did. Today, people can literally go online and order off our menu any of these items for delivery to North Korea, the very items the North Koreans are asking us to send them. And I actually brought some of these order forms if anybody's interested. But thanks to God provisions, through freedom-loving citizens of the world, we have sent in $200,000 in deliveries so far. The most recent delivery was 700 water balloons for a total of a ton of rice, plus Bibles and flash drives full of information. This is in addition to the daily radio broadcast of Free North Korea Radio that's being broadcast every morning and every evening into North Korea. When we are asked, when will the regime collapse? The North Korean defectors and I always say, tomorrow, because we really believe if we do what we need to do, that regime will come down. And when we're together, we always pray, Abuji Chayubakan. But we have to do our part until that day. So thank you very much. Regimes back in the 1990s, and the reason why I was doing that is I had started, when I became president of the foundation, our foundation was mostly focused on national security, and at the time there was a very strong Republican and Democrat support for the concept of peace through strength, which was one of the things that Ronald Reagan was, the policy that Ronald Reagan had was to bring people, that he felt that if America were strong, that was better for the whole world. And so we were doing these programs, but I realized that you can't just worry about our own security. Every single country in the world. Now that may have been what led Kim Jong-un to have negotiations with the Trump administration. But when he was talking about exchanging love letters and holding hands, I became physically ill. So I don't know what's gonna happen, but I think that he thinks like a businessman, and we have to remember the video he showed him in Singapore. And I don't know if you've seen it, but the video in Singapore they showed Kim Jong-un was, you can have this, Singapore prosperity, or you can have this, and it was a mushroom cloud. And so I'm hoping that he will go back to being very hard line on this issue. I wish that he would say to Kim Jong-un, you've been a terrible leader of your people, you're fired. That's what I hope you do. But I think that he will be very respectful of President Yoon's policies, and he understands the importance of the South Korean-US alliance. And I don't think, being the businessman he is, that he's gonna get fooled again. Because I really think that he was manipulated by Kim Jong-un. I mean, that's what they do. They do it all the time, and I've seen it again and again and again. They play on our governments. Oh, we'll have negotiations, but all the North Koreans are doing is extracting concessions and aids and trying to get the regime to survive. If we would start looking at the mindset that what the North Korean defectors know, Kim Jong-un does not care about the people, and when you're negotiating with him, he's only negotiating for his own, the salvation of his own regime. He's not doing anything to help their people. But if we can just keep at the forefront that this is, the guy sitting across the table doesn't care about the North Korean people, and you better, when you're negotiating with them, that'll change everything. So I'm hoping that that he'll have that. I mean, I'm encouraged that I think he learned from the developments of the past. And again, I think he'll be very respectful of President Yoon's policy. So that's the first question. The second one is about when will the regime collapse? Tomorrow, I said, tomorrow. It could happen in a couple of hours. No, I really do believe that people are well, there have been times when the people have risen up. And I think that 2009 was one example, which was when there was this huge pushback because the women had created the market system during the Arduous March. And if you remember what happened that time in 2009, Kim Jong-il had to respond because there was this huge outcry and pushback when they devalued the currency because they were trying to reassert control of the markets because they had completely lost control. And they had to step back and say, oh, sorry about that, and they had a guy executed, and Kim Jong-il was like, he did it, it was all his idea, I had nothing to do with that idea. So we've seen that kind of thing happen, and I think that that's what's starting to happen now, and that's why you see these things. So I think it could happen anytime, but that's why we have to be clear about what our desires are, because we have to realize that even the elites in power who are part of the structure of control are trapped.
So many other organizations focus on North Korean human rights. And what are your unique aspects of your work, and also how do you collaborate with other human rights groups?
Well, we have we do all of our work with a whole group of organizations. The North Korea Freedom Coalition is an organization that's composed of many, many different organizations and many, many individual private citizens. And people that are part of our coalition, we have retired senior citizens to high school students, college students, NGO leaders, and we meet about once a month. Most of our meetings are online, and we have people participate. The North Korean defectors actually participate and report back to us what's going on with Operation Truth. And anybody can join the North Korea Freedom Coalition. So, and people can join as individuals or as an NGO leaders. And we have 3 types of members. One is a private member, and we never acknowledge their members, but they get all the benefits of being members, and that's for people that are working in the Underground Railroad. They're involved, like maybe working out of China, and they can't be affiliated with us. And then we have friends that are people that worked in the government. We actually have people that worked in the UNHCR that were members, that were private members, who couldn't affiliate formally, but that's how we were able to rescue a lot of refugees, because we had people that were helping us. And then we have people that don't mind being affiliated with us, that are public members, but that's how we coordinate, and we welcome anyone, except that we ask that people share a statement, sign a statement of principle that they agree with us that we believe that in promoting human rights and the freedom of the North Korean people, and also that they pledge not to share information that's when we're going to have a meeting. Most of the time in our meetings, we want everybody to know what we're doing. We want Kim Jong-un to know what we're doing, because we want to give him, no. But anyway, we ask people, in case the defectors are reporting about a sensitive thing, that they not disclose that, so that people feel free to be able to share things. Like, for example, some of things happening with some of the refugees trying to get out. And we, in all the years that we've been doing this, 20, 30 years, we've never had anybody compromise. So, but it's amazing. So we try to coordinate with everybody. Everybody wants to be a member, but doesn't mind being affiliated with us. So.
Thank you so much, Susan. According to your lecture, and also I heard that many North Koreans really want unification, but in South Korean, unfortunately, I think we have so many different opinions, and when young people is not interested for unification much. What do you think most, you want, South Korean people to do for the unification?
Well, I know that there's a lot of concerns in South Korea. Part of the concern is that they're really concerned, not any of you, but a lot of young South Koreans are really concerned that if the regime collapses, that it's going to be a huge economic burden on South Korea. And they're concerned about the prosperity of South Korea being really damaged by the collapse of the regime. I completely disagree with that point of view. I think it's going to be, well, there was a phrase bonanza that was done by a book written by a South Korean. I think it's going to be a bonanza. And here's why. And also, there's a fear that when the regime collapses, that South Korea is going to be flooded with refugees. And I totally dismiss that. When the regime collapses, the reverse is going to happen. You're going to have so many people that want to go to North Korea. And I always tease about the Presbyterians and the Baptists and the Catholics are going to be fighting for territory, churches, all the big corporations, all the land speculators. There are going to be so many people that were going to go there. I know so many. All the North Koreans are going to want to go home and build the freedom, build a prosperous society that they've got to witness in South Korea. And then so you have to be sure to control the flow of people going in. Oh, that was the other thing. There's so many Korean Americans I know. Most of the Korean Americans have traced their family history back to North Korea. So a lot of Korean Americans are going to be going back. I can't tell you how many people have invited me to go to their home when North Korea opens up. Let me show you where I used to live. But I think that's one of the concerns, and we need to address that spot on and talk about the incredible opportunities that are going to come. And also, you cannot believe we did a program last year with, actually it was in March. It was in March. We did a program at the UN Commission on the Status of Women, UN Commission on the Status of Women, which is held in March every year. We always bring North Korean women over to testify. This year's theme was about economic prosperity and lifting women out of poverty. So we had 3 women that were entrepreneurs talk about how they prospered and how they made money. They were capitalists, and they loved it. They talked about, I love being able to make money and be able to feed my family, and they loved it. And the reason why, and in fact, Kim Ji-young was running restaurants in Pyongyang when they were, during the famine period, they allowed some of the market activity to happen. She was actually running noodle restaurants in Pyongyang. She was paying off all the bribes to all the Korean Worker Party members, whatever, to be able to run these noodle restaurants. But she said, Suzanne, my employees love me more than Kim Jong-il, which was but they did. But she loved it. I paid them well, and I loved it. I paid them well. They loved working for me. I loved what I was doing. They got that bug of capitalism. So you have to look at the fact that you have a workforce there. You mean we get paid? And it's going to be incredible for what's going to happen to the Korea when Korea is unified. This is wrong. This is wrong, this division. So that's what we have to communicate to the people of South Korea. But I also think we need to do more to educate people. I think we need to do more to educate Americans about communism, American students. And I think South Korea needs to educate their students more about communism, because our educational system's changed so much. And I'm going to give you one example, because this is the same thing that's happened in South Korea. When my oldest 2 sons were in high school, their government teacher used to invite me in, and to bring into their government class, they would invite me in with a North Korean defector to talk to the students, to tell them what it was like to live under communism, so they could hear firsthand knowledge of what it's like to live under a totalitarian system. My youngest son, who was 10 years and 11 years younger than 10 and 13 years younger than my oldest sons, he came home from high school. Okay, this is only like 10, 11 years later. And he said, Mom, my government teacher told the students today that communism was not bad, it just hadn't been perfected. And that, if you look at the surveys, people have a really high regard for socialism and communism now because they're not being taught same thing. In South Korea, so you have people there that are like, well, why can't we just, coexist? They have their form of government, we have our form of government. Let's not worry about it. So we have to overcome that with knowledge and truth. We have to tell the truth to our own students. So I think it's a combination of two things. Number one, making people realize, no, this is going to be a great thing for Korea. And then number two, that young people need to realize we have a moral obligation as citizens that live in free societies, whether we're Americans, whether we're Europeans, whether we're Australians, whether we're Koreans. We have a moral obligation as free people to stand up for the rights of those that are living in slavery and living under these systems of government. So I think those are the kinds of things we need to be communicating. But that's an excellent question because I do run into that a lot, and it really troubles me. But when South Koreans hear from North Koreans, oh my gosh, that changes everything. When they learn, when less like those government students. In fact, I got to tell you, you'll appreciate this. But one of the first things that the North Korean defector asked, this is my oldest son's government classes, he would say, when was whoever the president was at the time, when was President Biden born? When was President Bush born? This is probably when Bush was president. When was President Bush born? When was President Clinton born? And of course, all the high school students are like, I don't know when he was born. Okay, where do you live? Because you're getting ready to get hauled off to a political prison camp within your entire family, 3 generations, you're all going to, and they're like, what? And they go, that's what would happen. That is exactly what would happen to you if you lived in North Korea. You don't know when the dear leader's birthday is? And the students are like, oh my goodness, that's communism? So anyway, but it's just opening up their minds to the reality of these things.
Of course, from your point of view, why is the unification not happening soon enough? If you could list 5 main reasons why it's not happening, and if you could emphasize things we can do at our level, what can we do to help besides ordering the item from your Uber style form?
Well, I'm going to tell you what I told the First Lady of South Korea, because I thought it was very interesting that she asked this question, and she met with, very interesting, she met with Kim Ji-young, Ji Hana, and Kim Yo-hyuk, the boat captain. She requested to meet with them and myself during North Korea Freedom Week in July, which was the same week as the NATO summit. And we were trying to have a meeting with President Yoon, but it's the NATO summit. How can he spend time doing anything with North Korea Freedom Week when it's the NATO summit? So I was making an appeal saying, why do you want to be with some stuffy Europeans when you can be with Koreans? But we didn't get to meet with President Yoon, but the First Lady asked to meet with us. And she asked that question about when did the North Korean defectors think that the regime would collapse? And nobody would answer the question. Of course, I raised my hand. I said, tomorrow. The reason why it hasn't collapsed, and I said this, is because South Korean administrations have continuously bailed out the regimes that have been in power. And I give you an example. 1997, Hwang Jong-yap defected. Hwang Jong-yap was the highest ranking North Korean defector. In 1997, he defected, knowing what it would mean for his family. And let me tell you, I got to know him really well, and he really carried the burden that thousands of his friends, including his wife and children, were executed and killed. But he carried this burden that all of these friends of his, all of his colleagues, were carried off to political prison camps and executed. He carried this heavy burden, but he felt that regime was going to collapse. He felt that regime was going to collapse in 1997, and he thought, I'm going to go to South Korea and I'm going to help guide policy because the end is coming to that regime. And what happened? The sunshine policy. And the whole concept sounds like a great idea. They're the whole Aesop's fable of shining a little sunshine. You know the whole Aesop's fable about the rain, the guy with the coat on, and the sun and the rain. Anyway, the wind and the sun are fighting over it. But the whole idea was sunshine. It sounds like a great idea. Let's blow a little sunshine into North Korea. But the only one that got any sunshine was Kim Jong-il. The people didn't. 3 million people died. And in fact, Hwang Jun-yap said 3 million people have died. And you know, nobody believed him. They said, nah, it's like, 500,000, a million. And now we know that it was 3 million people. But he thought regimes collapsed. But what did we do? What did South Korea do in response? What did the United States do in response? We started this whole negotiations and we helped rebuild out the regime. And DJ Kim and Romian continued it, even though people were dying and starving to death. And so that's what I told the First Lady. I said, if the South Korean government would be firm and remember what President Yoon is saying, that talking about the human rights of the people that are suffering, then that regime would end. But they keep appeasing the regime, thinking that there's going to be some kind of progress, and then it never happens. So that's happened again and again and again. So the first thing is, stop bailing them out. It's a failed system that would collapse on its own if we would stop bailing it out. And I don't just blame the South Korean government. The U.S. government's been responsible for that. The fact that they spiked the story in 1999 about the political prison camps. I mean, we did the same thing. We kept wrapped up in these negotiations. And then the second thing is to focus on the people of North Korea and communicate the truth to them, and to continue to raise these issues. And one of the things we've got to hold firm on is this. Kim Jong-un is desperate, so desperate, that this information flow is continuing. He got Moon to stop, enact this law, that's unconstitutional law, that basically Operation Truth is illegal, even though it's unconstitutional because of that law is still on the books. But Moon was trying to stop all the information from going into North Korea, and who asked him to do that? Kim Jong-un and his sister. Kim Jong-un and Kim Yo-jong demanded that they take turn the loudspeakers off at the DMZ, and they stop the leafleting. So they passed a law in South Korea, which got enacted by the assembly, banning this activity, and they were moving towards, Moon administration was moving towards banning the radio broadcasting. Now, very important, South Koreans, under their constitution, have the right to impart information. They have freedom of speech. South Korea is also a signatory to the International Convention on Political Rights. The International Convention on Political Rights gives anybody in the world, any citizen in the world has the right to impart information across borders. And that information can be written, it can be broadcast, it could be any means you want. You have the right as free people to share information across borders. So that law violates South Korean constitution. It violates South Korea's international treaty obligations. It also became a concern to both Democrat and Republican members of Congress. They had a couple of hearings on this. What is Moon doing? Even the Democrats in Congress were like, what is he doing? He's taking away the rights of the people of South Korea, the rights that they're entitled to. So the second thing would be to overturn that law, and fortunately, President Yoon has declared it unconstitutional. They're not enforcing the law. But it shows you we need to, whatever Kim Jong-un demands of us is what we need to do more of. And remember something else. Most of North Koreans' military assets are near the DMZ. I can't remember the percentage, but I think it's like 60% of their Army and Air Force and large percentage of their naval assets are near the DMZ, so they could hear the loudspeakers. They could hear the information that was being shared. So why did Kim Jong-un demand that they take it down? Because it was having an impact. And now what they're going to try to do is they're doing the trash balloons because they're frustrated. President Yoon won't stop them. President Moon stopped them. Why won't President Yoon stop them? So he comes up with this idea, how do I get the Yoon administration to stop the leafleting, the rice bottle launches, all this information? How do I do it? How do I do it? He comes up with the idea. I know what I'll do. I'll balloon launch them right back with trash and fertilizer. And that's why they're doing it, because they're so frustrated they can't figure out how to get it to stop. So what they want to do is they want to get the South Korean people to turn against the North Korean defectors that are carrying out this activity. So they're trying to get South Koreans to turn against people that are actually doing good things. So we're sending rice and ramen noodles, and they're sending fertilizer and trash. I mean, that's what's going on here. So we need to stand firm in our convictions of what is the right thing to do. So that's another thing. But because this is still against the law, the Yoon administration can't directly support what we're doing. So that's why we're calling upon private citizens, Americans, to finance this work. And I'm really pleased to report to you that just in the last couple of weeks, a couple of remarkable things have happened. Operation Truth has been carried out almost 100% by Americans. And when I say Americans, I'm talking about Korean Americans, churches. It's churches across this United States. Almost all the funding has come for Free North Korea Radio from this continent and from the USA. And that includes just one donor, as a retired school teacher, an Anglo woman who's a retired school teacher, has a heart for North Korea. She sacrifices and sends us $10 a month. And we got a church in California that has a heart for mission. They send us $1,000 a month. And then we have a Korean church that does $250 a month, whatever. It's just people coming together to do this. But two incredible things, remarkable things have happened recently. Number one is, the last time I was in Korea was in September. And when we went to do one of the launches, I noticed all these people that I'd never seen before, Korean defectors. They were so intimidated to do anything before, but now they're seeing what you're doing and they want to be a part of it. So now you have more of these North Koreans that are showing up going, I want to take part. But the other remarkable thing happened is I'm very conscientious about reporting back to people when they make their delivery. I'm very conscientious. I send the money regularly, but the North Korean defectors know I'm not sending it again until you track and show me everything that you sent in, because people will keep supporting you. You show me that you sent in a ton of rice, they're going to order a ton more. But something else happened. I said, well, who did that launch? The one that just happened a couple weeks ago. And they said, oh, Suzanne, a church in South Korea. They heard about what we're doing, and they funded the entire thing. So now you have churches in South Korea that are saying, no, I'm going to speak out. I'm going to do something about this. So it's getting more people involved. So I think it's just continuously just understanding it's going to get hard, and it's going to get harder, but we have to continue to do this and support in any way we can. We have to keep speaking out, and we have to keep keeping our eyes on the people of North Korea, not losing that. That's what our heart and passion has to be, everything we can to do to help them. So anyway, I hope that answered the question.